Is that a bit loud?
No.
Can you guys hear that back there? Woo. Woo indeed. Big woo. Cool. I've been told not to be too loud. But I'm going to ignore that and be very loud. I might be loud. Should I like... Yeah? Louder? They want it louder. Fucking great.
Feel that bit.
Okay.
He's playing live with the YouTube.
I've just been told that if I do that again, the robots will malfunction.
Oh.
Which I think means that there'll be a kind of robot apocalypse. And no one wants that. What would be worse, a robot apocalypse or a nanobot apocalypse?
Nanobot.
Yeah, correct. You win nothing. So, okay. I've got a robot demo going on and I can't be too loud. So can you guys hear me at the back? Can you guys hear me at the back?
No.
Obviously not. Well, you don't speak English. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay,
no.
Cool. Thanks for coming. I would love to turn this into a rave, but I'm not allowed because the robots are going to kill us. So, I just wanted to expand on some of the stuff I was doing when I played at the arena. And for anyone who's got any questions about the rig and how it was made and how it works, I'll see if I can answer questions. So I don't know how loud it sounds to you guys out there, but cool. So can I just see like a show of hands of who like has ever done any music programming? Safe. So like I'm just sort of judging how deep I can go into like music theory with this shit. You guys are all coders and yeah. So right. So I'm not a coder really. I learned a tiny bit of BASIC when I was like 9, and then I did like an A-level in computing, which whatever. I think I got a C. I don't think I even got to do any code. I like built a database anyway. So like I'm not really a coder. But I started doing product design at university, and after doing product design for a while, the music thing took over and I had to quit the course. But I learned a little bit about the design process, and I kind of, I've always sort of had an eye for design and always wanted to design stuff. And now I wish I could code. But it's kind of been really good having a separation between me doing the designing and the guys that I've ended up working with doing the coding. And I'd like to actually hear at some point after I've done this little demo, like how you guys feel about that kind of division between designer and coder, because I know it's one that's fraught with difficulty, and I've had to actually learn a lot about how coding projects are managed, and the topology of the code inside this. Actually, I've had to sort of go on a bit of a crash course just so I can sort of keep abreast of what's going on. But I think this project is unique in being the only time that a project of this scale has been done using something as low level as C for a single user, that being a musician. I don't think that's been done before. There's loads of hobbyist programs that I started off trying to use. So I had this dream of being able to, I don't know if you guys can hear this, but to be able to just instantly sample my voice. So that was my voice. I'll try and do it so it's a bit more obvious with a different piece of sound. Sample my voice. Sample my voice. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, the ability to sort of go that, you know, it's weird. There's tiny little things that would be so easy to do, but nothing currently does it. I'm sure you all know what that feels like. So like, you know, so you have to go out there and sort of do it yourself. So the journey that I've been on is basically I started as a beatboxer about 10 years ago, having always beatboxed, never thinking it would be of any use. Then ended up winning some championships, and Then my parents got off my back because they were like, oh, he's got a qualification. So like I'd won these championships and I started doing beatbox stuff, but I got really bored of beatbox because it's so limiting. And I just wanted to be able to use my voice as a component instead of having to stand there just with the microphone the whole time. So what I've done is just been on this journey for the last sort of 7 years or so to try and make this machine come into existence. I tried Chaos Pads, and they're like, Chaos Pads are this, how you'll say, box with like a screen and their shit. It was just this nightmare to try and put together. There were wires everywhere, it was bullshit. So after that I tried using some freeware. It was this looper that someone had made called Mobius, and that was quite cool, but it was freeware, so it was unsupported, and that's fine when you're not in front of thousands of people and you don't want it to crash. But I was, so I couldn't use that. I tried like these 1U rack mount boxes that were made by this hobbyist who actually designs prison security software, but in his spare time he was making these units, and that was called the Looperlative. Clever name. So like I was using that for a bit at home, trying to get that to a state of readiness where I could take it out live, but it kept crashing on me. It was just the one dude doing it, and I couldn't get into the box to tweak it. I didn't know how long that guy was gonna like live, and he had like a liver complaint. So I'd be saying, dude, there's a bug here, it keeps crashing, and I heard nothing for 6 months, and finally he gets back to me. He's like, sorry, my liver had packed up, how can I help you? And by that point I'd already moved on to another attempted solution to try and get this thing to exist, which was something called BeardyMan by a company called Plogue. Maybe you know it. They're a French company. They make audio stuff, and this thing is a kind of idiot's guide to modular routing environments for audio. So I used that for a bit, and I was hosting this program Mobius in it, which is a piece of freeware, and it just kept crashing, and I realized I was out of my depth. Knowing what I know now, I probably could have stuck with that. But I went to find some help, and I ended up using MaxMSP. And again, that's got quite a steep learning curve if you don't know what you're doing with it. So I ended up going to this genius MaxMSP guy called Sebastian Lex at Goldsmiths University, and he built me what I thought was going to be the final thing, and it ended up being 3 years of essentially prototyping, because we couldn't get the CPU to a reasonable level. It was just maxed out, because MaxMSP, being a modular environment, has this huge CPU overhead. So I just had no choice but to seek out somebody who could build it from the ground up in C. Originally we just wanted to build the engine at its core, just the audio engine that was doing all the buffer shuffling and stuff like that. I mean, that was all we really needed to reduce the CPU load. But it was a man called Dave Gamble, who some of you might have heard of. He's kind of, I think he invented maths. He's amazing. He's kind of like, he can bend the laws of maths. He's very clever. And he did this, well, he made this from scratch, I think just because he liked the idea of doing it. I mean, it was exciting to him to be able to sort of build something so raw from the ground up. So we engaged in this project, which at the time we thought was going to take like 2 weeks. He thought it was going to take 2 weeks. He could not have been more wrong. And for about the next 6 months, I was basically living in his house, working in a really unconventional way that would probably be a nightmare to most of you, and I don't think will ever be repeated in the history of computing. I was sitting there while he was coding, and it was amazing to watch because he's a super fast coder, like, incredible. But and that's the first time I've ever seen code being written live, really. But it was amazing to watch and to see someone's brain work in that way, and to see the thing kind of evolve, because at first I wrote a very detailed spec, but there are concepts in this, and I'll go into quite a few of them, but there's some which are kind of trade secrets, and these kind of, the robots are taking over. There's this kind of unpatented IP in here, which if I was to patent, would cost me thousands of pounds per patent just to get the lawyer's fees in, and then patents are only worth your ability to fight them in court financially. So secrecy is the name of the game. I would love to have a camera on here showing you how this all works. but unless I was willing to hand out NDAs, I won't. So, but I can tell you a lot about some of the underlying processes. So, I mean, some of the things that you can't do with anything but the best looping devices or programs in the world are things like being able to replace audio and replace audio in a quantized way. So, for example, if I go now, find a replacement to it. Now, another thing I can do now is to double the length of that loop, so you won't hear it happening because the loop is iterating, but it'll just be iterating twice the length, and then I can cut into that again to make a musical phrase. So that's like, I mean, that's a bit shit, but that's kind of the kind of thing you can do. I mean, there's a way of generating musical phrases. You have a repeating phrase of some sort, you perform a manipulation on that, and then you make it longer, and you perform another manipulation on it, you make that longer again, you perform more manipulations, and that's kind of what most musical melodies are. So inherent in there, I use that all the time when I'm playing live. So that's like one of the more basic things that this can do. Another thing that no other looping system in the world could do was song sections. Oh, I couldn't see it convincingly. Oh, I should mention, by the way, that if any of you know Ableton, it can almost do this, but it can't actually do it. And the things that it can't do, even though they've got a looper in there, the looper has an irrevocable latency that you can't get rid of. And I contacted them about it, and I was like, why don't you compensate for the plugin latency? And they're like, we can't be bothered. That was literally their answer. It was like, we've got better things to do. And it's maddening because that I don't know why, I have no idea why they don't think that's the thing to attack. But so because of that, and because of the fact that if you want to freely move loops around, then I don't know whether that's within their API to do. I mean, I thought of using Max for Live, which is Max MSP, recently having been integrated into Ableton. You can now sort of, they're one thing, kind of. So that the CPU overhead, again, would have been too high. So I'll show you some more stuff that this can do. Song sections. So if I lay down a beat, quietly so I don't wake up the robots, and I can be like, back to section 1. Section 2, section 1. So that's a really subtle thing that on all the loopers that I've seen, you can either do that and switch between loops, or you can overdub. And overdubbing is do what I just said, is go like that's overdubbing. So like all of these loopers that were available could do either that or overdubbing, or they could replace, but they couldn't do it in a quantized fashion, or they could resample through effects, which I'll show you in a minute, into the same loop, but they couldn't do any of the other things. So I just decided basically to take everything I'd ever seen in a looper, which all seemed like obvious steps to me, put them into the same spec, get someone to build it from the ground up, and for some reason I thought that would be an easy task, but it was 6 months of hard work. I'll show you some other things that it can do that other things can't. Well, it's weird. I guess it's like anything. It's the little things that make this unique. So, for example, the ability to stop and start loops freely just by pressing them. Weirdly, that isn't on anything else I've seen. It's weird. It's like, I'll tell you the problem. The problem is, the reason why this hasn't existed until now is because people have tried to make loopers, but they've kept it so secret when they've been making one that they never seem to have consulted someone that does looping when they're making it. And there's probably a lesson there for like anyone making anything. Like, it's weird. So that's, I think, why you don't find people doing that much looping, is because normally a looper is like a looping device enables you to just, you know, I mean, the way they set it, anytime them, anytime like a company releases a looping device, the blurb normally says 140 hours of looping time. Like, when are you ever going to use 100? Like, you know, I could make a 140-hour loop here. I don't think any of you will be here when I'd finish recording it. So, I mean, it's weird that they don't seem to have consulted any looping artists. And actually, maybe I won't mention them by name, but there was a company who make some loopers, and I was talking to them about why their app sucks, because they came around my house to do some promo stuff, and I was like, you know, you want me to promote a piece of shit. I was like, you know, this sucks. And they're like, well, we don't know it sucks, tell me more. And I'm like, well, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. And all of these things are things which are vital for this to work. So I'll show you some more. What else can I show you? There's so much that it does, it's crazy. There's like a million ways to do each thing, and that's what's part of what's so good about this, is that any situation you're in, you can find a solution, like a workaround. So what a lot of looping systems can't do is to dynamically realign the the alignment of the entire project, which you need to be able to do. Nothing has ever been able to do that. So we've actually got 3 independent clocks running. And I'm going to need to think here about how much I can actually say about this. But we've got 3 independent clocks running, completely sort of free floating, which I don't think has ever happened before. So there's a lot of clever buffer management going on. And that enables me to, it's been hard to demonstrate. Anytime I've tried to show someone this, it's been hard to demonstrate. So I'll start a line halfway through, for example. I'll be like, so I actually started recording that halfway through the musical phrase. So now if I restart it, it goes. But I want it to start at the beginning, so I can dynamically reset the start point, wait for it to come round, and then go. So you can't hear anything, but then when I restart it, it goes. So that's a really basic thing, but nothing does it. And I couldn't do what I do without that. Like, a million times I'll be, or even something as simple as, you know, if I'm going like, because you know when you're doing that. So I'll have like, so yes, using some effects. But, okay, I'll lay down a beat. Oh, and by the way, what I'm doing on the screen as I'm doing that, I've got the, this is why we couldn't use OSC or MIDI, is because I needed visual feedback of the loop itself. So I can see the loop, there's a little play bar going across. By trial and error, we figured out that you need to have sort of bar markers and line markers, and that took a lot of configuring to figure out an efficient way of visualizing all this data on screen. I wish I could show you guys. But it's, you know, so I've got this little ticker sort of running across that one kick drum. And I was just lining it up. So we've got a ratio of finger movement to wave movement, and that's vital because that's now running in time with the clock because I've lined it up. Now if I go into a preset like this, so if the clock is out of time, it'll sound shit. I'll show you. It starts to shift. So that's vital, and I've never seen that on anything else, the ability to just dynamically realign where the clock thinks it is. So it's kind of a time machine as well, because to be able to, for the machine to be aware of the throughput latency, and you'd probably have to talk to Dave Gamble, the guy that built this, for him to say exactly how he's managing this memory. But there are 3 independent loci that tell the system what it should be grabbing. And there's all kinds of offsets going on, and it's actually calibrated pretty much to this computer. Initially, anyway, it was kind of a blunt tool for doing all this stuff, and the program's become more modular and more segmented as we have slowly sort of increased the feature set, and we kept sort of running into points where we're like, shit, we need to refactor again. So I suppose if we'd have started out with a really ambitious spec, like a really ambitious spec, like the ultimate spec, and programmed to that, making allowances for where it was going to go, then we wouldn't have had to refactor so many times. And I guess that's just good programming now. But like, I mean, up till very recently, I was kind of doing very bad programming practice and just kind of pushing through all these features that I wanted, rather than attacking bugs, which is really bad. So it's been a very arse backwards way of working. I mean, I'm not going to do anything like that again. I was also taking the live rig out, it having been changed like a week before, and then just trying to do a gig with it. And I'd replaced where all the buttons were, and we changed loads of stuff in the engine, and it would crash in front of 5,000 people. So I've been learning on the job about what is and is not appropriate. But one of the things that was just part of my feature creep problem is the thing which I used the most throughout the gig, which is this instant sampler, which is I've got a machine here, Native Instruments machine, and that's the thing that I can do this like instant sampling with. Instance. But that allows me to do really cool stuff like being able to go like that, sample it, and then to be able to assign that to a keyboard. So it's kind of the 80s. But then if I want, I can add sort of next level Eno-like effects to it. So I go. So it sounds kind of granular, but it's not. It's actually just loads of reverb and stuff like that. And, well, there is some granular stuff going on in it. But I mean, that wasn't a fantastic example. It'd be good if it was like really loud and shit. See if I can get out of it now. So anyway, it's kind of, that kind of stuff is cool to do. And the ideas I've got for this are I want to make that instant sampler into an instant workstation, which would be ambitious as fuck, but not actually that time consuming, really. In fact, not ambitious at all. It just takes doing. I could go into why it would be easy to do. Because basically, well, it's funny, isn't it? As soon as you come up with an idea, it's always easy to come up with 70 others. As soon as you start playing with something, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with Brett Victor. Maybe everyone. He's rather brilliant. He's got this whole thing about inventing on principle, and he's a big advocate of the idea that you should be able to code and dynamically see how the code is changing on screen, so you can kind of play the code like an instrument. And he started off doing sort of improvised music, and we've been in contact just about the similarities between what it is we're doing. So it's this kind of musical ethos of being able to sort of not have to stop to think as you're making music, which is so cool about this for me. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can sort of show you quickly or anything more I can tell you. I think maybe I've said enough and I should take questions. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, sir. Why is it not all over the world? Why is it not open source? Good question. I guess the answer to that is probably that because I have seriously thought about open source. Oh yeah, this is my beautiful assistant Adam. Please, round of applause for my beautiful assistant Adam. So, isn't he gorgeous? Oh my God, look at that ass. So yeah, why is it not open source? I think the short and the long of it is I'm selfish. And I think from a programming point of view, it would be amazing to have it be an open source project. It would get done a lot quicker, a lot cheaper. And I'm sure that you sound like an advocate of open sourcing. because it admits of degrees, doesn't it? I mean, because you can take a view on open sourcing depending on your circumstances, and you can change the open source project to fit your circumstances. Really though, because I'm the only person able to do this, having this, like at the moment I'm the only user of this software, and so long as I remain the only user, I'll remain the only person that can do this stuff. And that, annoyingly, for other people that would want to do it, is very important to me, because I make all my money that I make through performance. And so I suppose that's why. Because if it was just a programming project, then there'd be no harm in it. I mean, can you think of I'd love to hear a counterexample of why. Beautiful assistant. Where's my beautiful assistant? Do we have any? Yeah, a counterexample of why you think that might not work. I'm just fascinated to hear, because I'm fascinated by it.
I don't think it might not work, but I think it might be interesting to look at licensing that software. That way you can make money and have the great performance at the same time.
Yeah. I've been having talks with one software company in particular who I'm particularly interested in working with. I won't say who, but I deliberately haven't approached the bigger ones like Native and Ableton and stuff like that, because I think I just get sucked into them, and like their ethos is, well, they're a business, they're big businesses, and they would happily probably take on the ideas, but then I would lose control. And actually, to be honest, the only real reason that I would look past my like obvious selfishness as like someone who wants to perform with this thing that's taken so much time to make, the only reason why I would sort of sell this for others to use at the moment is in return for work being done on this system itself. So the arrangement that I've been talking with this software company that are interested about is a kind of weird deal where they would help me build this rig that would inform the sort of iPad-based program that it would be. Just be like an app. It'd be like a condensed version of this, but there'd be two separate rigs. So that's the kind of thing I've been talking about doing. It's a very unusual. I don't think that's ever been done before. I don't think they'll go for it, to be honest. I wouldn't if I was them. It sounds weird. So what I'm actually trying to do is, I've already, I just hired someone today to do 3 months of contract work. I hired someone a week ago to do 3 months of contract work. All sort of very kind of formal employment and scope of work, all detailed out and stuff like that. Because there's a sort of huge and burgeoning bug lists and feature lists and stuff. So it's just trying to manage this project as best as possible. I know that there are advocates of open sourcing who abhor the idea that anyone should pay for software ever. I don't know how extreme you are in your views. But it is interesting, and I have definitely considered it, because it seems like a way to just accelerate the speed at which this gets worked on. And there's an argument to suggest that actually, if it was open source and if people did start using it, then I could always take credit for their success as well, and that would reflect well on me. Say what? I'd be even more of a hero to men with beards. Yeah, that's true. Does anyone else have anything to add to that, or a different question?
Yeah, I'm also a man with a beard, and I actually agree with. I really agree with the way that you're doing it, and I think it's because it's very easy to look at it because it's software from a software maker's point of view. But you're using it as a tool in order to create some form of art, and ultimately you want to be the chief driver for where it's going, but also you don't want to be, sort of the project leader for people contributing back and everything like that. I could see how potentially if you were to reach an agreement with a company whereby they produce an edition of what you're doing, and therefore you get the benefits back from that. But I think it's the whole thing of having total artistic freedom with it. And I think that's really, really important, because the reason I went into trying to do some music for a while, but I just stopped almost straight away because of my immediate frustration with the tools. So, I see where you're coming from, personally.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. More and more you're seeing musicians making their own instruments. I mean, every instrument that exists was made by a musician. Like the saxophone was the most recent sort of orchestral instrument, but I mean, it hasn't been possible before for people to have the means to make their own instruments of the kind that there are now. Like, it used to be quite a fringe activity. There's a guy called Tim Exile who could quite easily be here talking about a very similar system that he made. He was my inspiration to start. He uses Reactor, and that's by Native Instruments, and it's an incredible thing. But I've been talking to him a lot about, you know, how whether or not we're insane trying to do this kind of stuff, and it's an interesting journey to be on if you are a designer of software but you're not the coder. It's interesting because that's kind of frowned upon on Kickstarter, for example. You're not allowed to fund a project if it's software and you're not the coder. So I guess they don't want to be a kind of VC channel. They want to make sure it's about the arts and about people actually doing things themselves. But I can't help but think that, do you know what? There was a Will.i.am came up with the wisest thing I've heard in a while, which was that because he's been trying to make stuff recently, and he was like, I want to learn to code because coders are like the priesthood of old, you know, and everyone needs to learn how to code. So Will.i.am is wise. Who knew? If only he'd make wiser musical decisions. Yes, sir. Beautiful assistant with microphone. Oh, we actually have a genuinely beautiful assistant now. That's awesome. Oh, sorry, we have one over there first. Sorry, we'll come to you next.
Hi, thanks. It's really interesting to hear this journey you've been on and to bring in that open source thing. I totally understand where you're coming from. I'm an app developer, but I come from a design and a creative background. And being a kind of part-time musician, I play bass in a band. I've seen the frustration with software that's available and not being able to do things. And I go, this is sucking up way too much of my time, and I need to develop something that's going to not, drive me mad and drive me crazy. So keeping control of what you've done, I think, is the right thing to do. But I'm a big open source proponent for all the stuff I do. I try and create open source widgets. I know that what I'm developing may require 15 components, but there's no reason why you can't create a ground level component that your magic works on, but is powered that people could potentially go off in some really interesting directions with something that doesn't really give away what you're doing. But what you're doing right now is almost open source. You're talking about the project. You're not being closed about it. You're being quite open about a lot of the processes.
This is the most open I've been about. I mean, well, it's more that no one actually gives a shit apart from people like yourselves. So I've not actually had an opportunity to sort of talk about it, but yeah.
But I think if you were to do more things like this, and there's lots of discussions in user experience and user interaction, and I think coders really need to be part of that design and start to learn that world, because it's one and the same. It's not separate things, and that's where the problems arise. So that's just kind of my input, and I'm just being very interested to hear it. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I think the thing with open source that I've learned in the brief time that I've actually been sort of even vaguely aware of it is that it very much depends on your circumstances as to what kind of open sourcing licensing you will use, and whether or not it will suit you and your project. But I'd love to actually have a talk with you and you as well, just about open sourcing artists, because it does fascinate me, and there may well be a way to sort of open things up without giving. I mean, to be honest, you'd need to buy 3 iPads and this exact equipment to sort of do it. And I've also heard it said from some people that have, like, the counter argument to me saying, oh, I want to keep hold of this and I don't want anyone else to get hold of it. Like, they're like, well, no one else could do what you're doing with it, which is, if that is true, then that presents a problem when I actually come to release this, because it means that the market for it will be very, very witheringly small. But I don't know if that's true. I think there is some things to do. I mean, even if it was an iPad app as a toy for kids, I think it would be really fun to use. And you could always have sort of a variety of different levels of complexity. 169p and the top one's 20 quid or something. That's the kind of thing I'm looking at. I mean, I will say at the moment I'm not looking at open sourcing, and I'm not looking at selling a product at the moment, but the longer term plan in the next 3 years, which at the moment I'm just writing up a kind of sort of product trajectory for it all. Yeah, I want to have a product out, and to be honest, I want to be sort of at the helm of trying to make this sort of these ideas that I've encapsulated here part of a new way of making music. And it sounds kind of maybe insane to say it, but I think there is something inherent in the idea of not having to stop during the music making process, which is fundamental to keeping creativity going. Because I can now improvise. It's the idea of being able to improvise freely. Like that's why I'm doing this. It's like making stuff in my voice. That's not why I've made this. Like in my full rig, I've got a guitar, I've got keyboards and stuff. So I'm kind of convinced that there is a market for this that doesn't realise it's there yet. Maybe I'm insane. I don't know. Any other questions?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you kind of answered my question. Aren't you curious how other people would use this?
Yes.
Because like saxophone wouldn't have Charlie Parker in his mind, but certainly your beatbox talents and the way you sing are unique and cannot be replaced. But imagine very different people that don't have to go through the pain or don't have the means to